Hi, welcome to this podcast where we will explore and examine various thought-provoking books to identify their content's deep meaning and purposes, transferring them into practical applications for everyday living. So welcome to what I'm reading now. And I wanted to begin by just sharing with you what this month's book is entitled, and it's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I mentioned last month that I was going to be reading a book on financing. So let me just show you what that book looks like. It's by Robert Kiyosaki. So it was a very interesting book. And basically, it's a book that helps us in terms of finances. The book contrasts the financial philosophies of two father figures. And the author talks about his biological father, who emphasizes job security and traditional education, and his best friend's father, who advocates for financial literacy, investing, and entrepreneurship. The book teaches that the wealthy make money work for them through assets, while the poor and middle class often work for money without understanding how to build wealth. The book shows that wealth isn't about how much you earn, but how you think about money. So it was really a very fun book to read, and I want to just give you a quick overview and tell my story about this book. So I started reading the book, and basically what the author does, he contrasts his own father, who had a really good education, but really didn't understand how money worked and didn't really develop and grow his wealth. And then his friend's father, who was an entrepreneur, a businessman, and how the wealthy friend's father understood how money worked and actually grew his money. And so as I was reading this book, he basically identifies two columns, and one is assets and the other is liabilities. And the whole premise of the book is that you should have more on your asset column and less on your liabilities. And one of the things that he really advocates is that you shouldn't buy things on credit. You should really, live within your means, actually live within half of your means. So really what he advocates in this book, that let's say hypothetically you're making $100,000, that you should live on $50,000 and then use the other half to invest. And we're going to go through all the different ways you can actually make money. And so I tried to apply some of these principles in my own life as I was reading the book. And one of them is that if you can, you should always pay cash. You don't want a lot of things on your liability column. So things that create like loss of income. So you don't want credit card debt. You don't want a lot of expenditures in that liability column. So I ended up having, back in November, a hit-and-run accident. So now my car was totaled, and I needed to buy a new car. Now, fortunate for me, I knew that I was going to need a new car, so I had began basically putting money aside for a new car, which was great that I did that. But my plan was to purchase a new car in 2 years, so I didn't really have the full amount that I needed. But with the money I did have, and with the cost of the totaled car, because the car was totaled, I did have a certain amount of money to buy a newer car. Now, I went looking for a newer car, and people would tell me, why don't you just take out a loan? You can get a better car, more expensive car, take out a loan. So I researched loans, and for a new car or a used car, it was 5-point interest rate, and I said, I'm not taking out a loan for a new car or a newer car. So I wanted to work within my budget, and I did. I did find a car within my budget. I didn't take out any car loans, and I feel really good because I put nothing in that liability column. So remember, the premise of the book is that you want to increase your assets and decrease your liabilities. So that's one way that I've been able to apply this book in my own life, just really looking at my finances. And the other thing the author recommends is how do you grow your assets? There are different ways. One is through buying property, real estate, investing in stocks, and then starting a business. So actually, I've been thinking about all three of those since I read this book. Like, how am I going to be able to increase my assets? So now we're going to go into the 7 chapters of the book, which detail all the various aspects of what the author discusses in the book. And then at the end, we'll recap. And I actually looked at some of the critiques, because this book was written in 1997, and then it was updated in 2022. So we're going to be looking at what the chapters say, and then we'll be looking at some of the critiques, because economies change and things have changed even from 2022. So what are some of the key themes of this book? Financial education. He really emphasizes that most people don't have financial education. They don't understand how stocks work. They don't understand how taxes work. They don't understand how that if you just put money aside and save it in a bank, you're not really accruing interest, but if you put it in stocks, if you put it in various index funds, you're actually accruing. Your money's not just sitting there. One of the themes in the book is let your money, make money for you. Then another theme in the book is that traditional education focuses on job security. And once again, when the author contrasts his dad from his friend's dad, the friend's dad that was an entrepreneur, and his own dad, who really just said, you know what, go to college, get a good job, and then just work at your job, and as long as you have job security, you'll be fine. But the author was emphasizing it's not enough to have job security. You have to be able to you should have multiple streams of income so that you can actually, once again, have your money make money. He talks about here another key theme. True financial success requires understanding money management and investing. So once again, we're going to go over that a little bit. Once again, the poor dad emphasizes job security, academic success, and working for money. He believes in saving and living within one's means. But the rich dad, in contrast, advocates for financial education, investing in assets, entrepreneurship. He teaches that wealth is built through smart investments and financial literacy. And so now let's talk about some wealth building principles. The author emphasizes working smart, not hard. The rich make money work for them. This has been very evident as you're reading it. He says, invest in assets, focus on cash flowing assets rather than saving money. Once again, if you put your money in a bank, just a typical bank, you're getting maybe 1 or 2%. But if you invest in stocks or management real estate, you're actually getting cash flow. I love this quote here in the book. And this is what he wants you to say. It's called creative financing. Many of us, like, let's say hypothetically you want to buy a home. You say, well, I could never afford that. He says, no, you shouldn't say that. What you should say is, how can I afford that? And basically you're changing your thinking. So your brain actually starts thinking, yes, how can you afford that? Let's kind of brainstorm. So don't say, I can't afford that. Say, how can I afford that? What are some common misconceptions about money? Once again, that job security, believing that a secure job leads to financial stability, is a myth. It's not the way it was years ago. That saving can erode due to inflation. Investing is more effective. It's true. If you have $100 in the bank, it's accruing basically nothing, even if you have $1,000. But if you invest that $1,000, it will accrue much more interest. So what are some key lessons financial mindset? He really talks about how you should have, you shouldn't see yourself as poor, but you should see yourself as wealthy. Once again, he talks here, a key lesson is that you want to increase your assets and reduce your liabilities. And then what are assets? Assets are items that generate income, such as real estate, stocks, and businesses. Liabilities are items that incur expenses like loans, unnecessary consumer goods. The author stresses the importance of acquiring assets to build wealth. Now, when it comes to liabilities, people don't realize that every time you buy a high-end gadget, whatever that is, you're accruing a liability. And so, for example, I know some people that might spend $250 on a pair of sneakers. Now, you could take that $250, maybe buy a pair of sneakers for $50, and invest the $200. So once you want to reduce your liabilities and increase your assets. The author also talks about making money work for you. How does that happen? By putting your money in various stocks, whether it's or businesses or buying real estate. The book encourages readers to shift their mindset from working for money to making money work for them. And I think this is a huge shift. And you really don't really do that unless you consciously are aware. And so, like I said earlier, one of the key things is to live not only within your means, but less than your means. So if you're making that $100,000, don't spend $100,000. Try to live within the means of $50,000 and invest and make the rest of that money work for you. Once again, you're investing and seeking opportunities for passive income. What is passive income? Passive income is money that's coming into your assets. It's called cash flow that you're not having to do anything with. So, for example, I've even thought about it. Like if you bought a laundromat and you owned it, you would be getting passive income. You don't even have to be there. Maybe you might show up once a week. That's called passive income. You're owning something, you're accruing passive income without you even having to be there. Many people I know have purchased real estate and apartment buildings, and you're accruing passive income without having to be there. So the first part of the book says that your thoughts shape your life and that money is power, and it's true. If money is power because it gives you the opportunity to do the things you'd like to do. It can also be an opportunity to influence others. How many people through their giving influence others? So there's a quote in the book that says there is a difference between being poor and being broke. Broke is temporary. Poor is eternal. So don't see yourself as poor. You might be broke, but broke is just a temporary. He said that you should start thinking of yourself as a rich person. I'm a rich woman. I'm a rich man. He goes on to discuss that money is a form of power once again. In chapter 1, he says that the rich have money work for them. Now, let's look at the different chapters. The first chapter discusses that life is your best teacher. And so here in this chapter, he talks about how different disciplines and principles govern their lives. So the rich dad, he realized that the only person he could change is himself. So he had to have the discipline to use his finances wisely. Whereas the poor dad, he identifies him as poor dad. He wasn't poor, he was educated, but he didn't know how to discipline himself so that he lived below his means and he could invest some of his income. So the first thing he says to do is you have to learn how money works so that you can make it work for you. He also says in this chapter that most people, when given more money, get into more debt. It's true. People that play the lottery. I mean, you can see it. It's very evident that even if you give people more money, that doesn't mean that solves all their problems. And for most people, they'll just get into more debt. So basically, he talks about a lack of financial education is the problem, and people don't know how money works. So now, when this author was young, and his friend's dad, when they were like 9 years old, both of them wanted to learn how money works. So the dad said, "Come and work for me." So he put these two 9-year-old boys to work, and initially he would pay them 10 cents an hour. And the boys were complaining, like, wow, this is nothing. And so then the rich dad said, okay, then I'm not going to pay you anything. He said, because you're not coming to work to get money, you're coming to work to learn. And he was teaching them an important lesson, that when you're working, it's not about the money, it's about what you're learning. And that's more important than the amount of money you're getting. So he also talks about in this chapter how two emotions really govern our lives about money. One is fear and the other is greed, and it's true. So sometimes you're too fearful to take risks, and the other times you're too greedy, you're taking risks you shouldn't be taking. And people are afraid of running out of money. So basically in this chapter he talks about never stop searching for information and self-knowledge. And here he also talks about emotions. So don't make your financial decisions based on emotions. Emotions, you can't trust them. He says, learn to use your emotions to think, not think with your emotions. You should be choosing what you think. So basically he said when your emotions go up, your intelligence goes down. So let's look at chapter 2. He says in chapter 2 that we should make opportunities to make money. Look for opportunities. And I know that people have done that. Here he discusses financial literacy in this chapter. He says, your greatest wealth is your education. Intelligence solves problems. Rich people acquire assets, and poor middle-class people acquire liabilities they think are assets. I was someone, when I was having my car looked at, someone in the car dealership was discussing with me how a friend of his bought a $170,000 car, which I immediately thought, oh, that's a liability. And then he shared how this person went to go get the oil change on this $170,000 car, and it cost $500, and he was upset that he had to pay $500 for an oil change. And so this person was telling me, why didn't he think about that before he bought the $170,000 car? So you can see how a new car, or any new car, isn't an asset, it's a liability. You don't want to have a lot of liabilities in that column. He discusses that you should spend your life buying and building assets. Once again, real estate, stock, or business. The rich have their money, work hard for them. Cash flow tells the story of how a person handles money. And then he says here, wealth is a true measure of how much money your money is making money for you. So the wealthy are having their money make money for them. The poor only has expenses. The middle class buy liabilities they think are assets, like this car. Assets add to your income. So he says, keep your expenses low, reduce liabilities, and diligently build a base of solid assets. He recommends buying businesses that do not require your presence, like I just mentioned earlier. You own them, you manage them, but you let other people run them. Other ways of making money are stocks, bonds, home-generated real estate, notes, royalties from intellectual property. So what does he say in Chapter 4? He discusses using tax incentives. So he has a big section on tax incentives so that you don't pay taxes. True capitalists use their financial knowledge, he says, to simply find an escape clause, and it's true. If you look at some of the most wealthiest people, like I think even Elon Musk talks about how he doesn't take a salary, because if you take a salary, then you have to pay taxes on your income. So there's other ways around it, so you don't even have to pay taxes. The rich do not pay more taxes. They create legal loopholes. Make your money work for you. Here he talks about creating an LLC. Let's look at Chapter 5. Wealth, he says, is information. Financial intelligence is having more options. You can't just save money. Purchase real estate, creative passive income, plant seeds in your asset column. So Chapter 6, he talks about job security meant everything to my educated dad, he said. Learning meant everything to my rich dad. Here he discusses management skills for success, which are management for cash flow, management of systems, and management of people. Now, I thought this chapter was interesting because I've always heard that you should become an expert in something. Become an expert, I've heard. And now he's saying the very opposite. He says, know a little about a lot. And basically what he said is those selling and marketing read wisely and widely. And here what he's really trying to communicate is that we're living in a technological environment where you need to know a lot about a lot of things. You can't just know one thing, especially if hypothetically if you're going to start a business. You need to know how to read a balance sheet. You need to know how to market. You need to know how to manage people. So he says you need to know a lot. Know a little about a lot. And then he says here in this chapter, bring smart people together. Maybe even take a second job. Grow your skill set. Get support of people around you. So now in Chapter 7, he says, this is the chapter where he talks about obstacles, and there are many obstacles to even pursuing all of these endeavors. But he says the primary obstacle is fear. He says embrace your fear and embrace making mistakes. Because a lot of, if you talk to people who are wealthy, they will tell you that at some point they were bankrupt. At some point they did lose money. At some point they did make a mistake. He said, embrace your mistakes. Turn disaster into opportunity. And then he talks here about how do you deal with failure. So now I want to just give you an updated perspective because, like I said, this book was written many years ago. So now some things have changed, obviously, because the economy has changed. So here, let's look at these changes. So the first chapter, assets versus liabilities, he said is still true. but broader now. And here, what people recommend is you want to buy modern assets like index funds, ETFs, dividend stocks, online businesses, intellectual property, rental real estate, high-yield savings. Those are all assets. So you have a lot of opportunities now, actually, to create wealth, make your money work for you. Some of the modern liabilities today are lifestyle inflation, subscription overload, high interest debt, and depreciating gadgets. So those are the things you want to remove and try to limit. He says here, the principle matters more than the label. Does it generate cash flow or long-term value? So once again, you want to build your asset. Let's look at some updated information on Chapter 2. He says financial education is still lacking. Schools still don't teach taxes, investing basics, credit and debt management, and entrepreneurship. It's true. They still don't teach these things. And yet so many young people would benefit from that information. Today, financial education is self-directed. So now we're living in a time where whatever you want to know, you can learn. Everything is on the internet. He talks here about free platforms, YouTube, podcasts, newsletters, whatever you want to learn about financing, you can find out. Low-cost investing apps, you can purchase those. I've seen them. And online courses. So we're living in a time where you really can become wealthy. The advantage now is access is easier than ever, but discipline matters. Absolutely. If you're watching a podcast about making money, you have to be disciplined to follow through with whatever you're learning. Chapter 3, what's updated here? Work to learn fits the skill economy. In today's economy, skills like coding, marketing, data analysis, AI literacy, sales, and content creation compound faster than job titles. It's true. So going back to know a little about a lot, you could be really skilling yourself in so many areas so that when the time comes you need those skills, you have them. He says job hopping for skill growth often beats loyalty for raises. And this is the difference between years ago. Years ago, your parents, most people, worked at a job 30, 40 years. They stayed there, they had their income, but now people are not doing that. You're actually, what they're advocating now is that you actually do job hopping. You go to one job, you learn a skill, and then you go to another job, you learn another skill. This is how you can accrue more financial assets and more skills. It says learn income-producing skills that can scale beyond hourly work. And this you can do right online. Let's look at number 3, downplaying stable careers and salaries. Why is that outdated? High-income professionals can build wealth faster today by investing consistently. So once again, it goes back to taking the money that you put aside, living beneath your means, and investing that money. He talks here about employee benefits, 401k match, stock grants, health care are significant, and this is still an opportunity. So basically, the modern view is a strong income plus disciplined investing can outperform risky entrepreneurship. So this is key. You can do this without taking a lot of risk. Let's look at Chapter 4, what's changed. Making money work for you, that passive income. True passive income is rare, but you can do it through index investing, wealth building, real estate, semi-passive with management, digital products, and online businesses. I know so many people that are starting their own businesses, and it's fun, and they're making money. So basically, when you think about it, a business, automation and ownership equal leverage. So let's look at Chapter 4. Schools is mostly useless for financial success. He says, why is it misleading? He said, education strongly correlates with higher lifetime earnings. So what kind of education should you pursue? Degrees in STEM, medicine, law, and finance still provide leverage. So it's not that he's against education. It's what kind of education are you pursuing? And here he says, formal education plus financial literacy is a powerful combination. So let's look at Chapter 5. Risk is about ignorance, not volatility. So Kiyosaki argues risk comes from not understanding what you're doing. Today, this applies to meme stocks or crypto hype, and so there's a lot of different opinions about crypto coins, get-rich-quick online schemes, and over-leveraging with debt. So be careful about those risks. He says knowledge reduces risk more than playing it safe. He also talks about in here in this chapter is that he encourages bold risk-taking without emphasizing downside protection. So in the book, he really didn't talk about any of the failures that people endure, but you will have mistakes. So here in chapter 5, risk should be measured, diversified, and managed, not embraced blindly. So be careful even as you're taking your risks. So let's look at chapter 6. What are some updated critiques? Business owners and investors still have more legal tax flexibility than employees. Retirement accounts, HSAs, and small business deductions are modern tools, so taxes still play a key role in making money. You don't need to be rich, just intentional and informed. So tax and corporation advice. Here, he says that it was just a little bit too vague because tax and laws are always changing. He says tax laws vary widely and change often. Readers may think forming an LLC automatically saves taxes. It doesn't, so this is good to know. Tax automatization requires specific legal and professional guidance, so you still need to go to a professional. What still holds up? Assets first thinking, financial literacy as a personal responsibility, skill building over comfort, and ownership mindset. These still are in play. And the last chapter, job security has declined. Layoffs, automation, and AI make single income dependence risky. Yes, you really should try to have a multiple source of income. And today you can. You can be working a full-time job and have a side gig, have a side business. I know a lot of people that are doing that. You can have a full-time job and maybe buy some property. You can have a full-time job, and obviously you can be investing. Ownership and optionality matter more than stability. So what's the bottom line? For Rich Dad, Poor Dad, ownership over consumption, skills over credentials, cash flow over salary, and learning over fear. So once again, because of the real estate market is changing, real estate may not be right now the best way to grow your assets. And so here he talks about, once again, index funds, REITs, and online businesses. So let's recap real quick. Your mindset matters more than your paycheck. Assets feed you, liabilities eat you. Schools teach subjects, not money. Job security won't make you rich, so you want to diversify your asset column. So that was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I hope you learned something. I think the first and foremost is to grow your assets, put some money away, and eventually as it accrues, put it in stocks, buy property, or even start a business. Well, I hope you learned something and you can apply it to your own life. I know I did. I know I put this information to work in my own life, and I'm going to still be working and applying it. So next month we're going to be looking at a biblical passage in Proverbs 30 and learning some practical applications there to grow our professional skills. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next month as we listen to what I'm reading now. Have a great month.